Hello, everybody. Welcome there, internet world. This is Noe with Walk with Yah Ministries. Glad you can make it back. Glad you can make it here. Got another great night of just Bible learning, spiritual warfare topic type stuff going on for your enjoyment. Not only for your enjoyment, for your application of your, in your life and to help yourself and hopefully to help others. Hopefully you're learning as you go. Hopefully this just isn't head knowledge and you're just, you actually are doing stuff with this. That's kind of the point. Trying to help educate people to how to fight back. Not just talking about, not necessarily with fists and stuff like that, but spiritually, where I believe most of the battle is. Anyways, Walk with Yah, if you didn't know, is a ministry that helps people get rid of their spiritual oppression so they can do whatever it is that they were called to do in the kingdom, because that's really how we win, is by getting everyone to doing what they're doing in the kingdom with whatever their spiritual gifts are. It isn't necessarily just to help people go back to their normal life. There's a bigger picture than that. And so, although right now I'm not doing a lot of ministry per se, I am trying to keep these videos going just to help people, again, learn and stuff like that. Walk with Yah also teaches on various aspects of spiritual warfare and how to apply the Bible to your life. So that way you can learn how to take dominion as you have been called to do. That's over various aspects of your life. Anyways, welcome back. We're going to be talking about this topic called patterns of time tonight. I'm going to get into it. As you know, I like to pack a lot of information in an hour's time. And I just need to let you know for this live stream, I'm going to actually be combining two topics somewhat. Patterns are what some people may call fractals, which are just recurring patterns. And then I'm going to be adding the topic of time on top of that, as these are somewhat related terms. I felt that Yah, God, wanted me to teach on this topic, although I didn't feel quite qualified. And, we'll see how it comes out as I'm kind of stepping out. But I actually had more to write than I thought than I had in me. So just pray for me that my human spirit kicks in and teaches you more than my soul does. So I invite my human spirit to come to the front for this. Hey, and even your human spirit as well. For all teachings, really. Again, this is Noe with Walk with Yah. Please feel free to hit me up with any questions, comments, either now during the live stream, while it's live, or even later. I'll try to get to those as I can. If you're here, again, live or later, you can chat, type something in. The more that you have to say, the more comments you have, the more thoughts, it helps us all to learn. We're learning, from one another. I was talking to one of my clients the other day, and I was like, well, yeah, I learned from you. And she was like, really? Like, you learned from me? And I'm like, well, yeah. I'm like, I got some ideas, but I don't really know until I test those out. Shalom, Madeline. Glad you could make it. Yay. Woohoo! All right, now we can kind of get started. And so yeah, I'm learning from the people that I talk to, whether it's head knowledge or clients, application, because we can all learn from one another. And don't feel that I know everything, because I don't. I'm still learning. That's what kind of, when we were told to take dominion, that's part of the process, is we're learning to discover his creation, just as the angels are, just as the unclean spirits are. They're trying to figure out how God's creation works. And so, that's what kind of keeps us young in some aspect. And so, yes, I learn from you all. Well, I learn from Madeline and others that, show up and hit me up with questions and stuff like that. And so, you can learn from anybody, really. Also, if you want to donate to the ministry, you can go to www.walkwithyah.com/donations, because this ministry is run on donations. But let's get started. Again, a lot to cover tonight. So, this first topic I wanted to, I called Time for Soul Fragments. And for those that are familiar with Walk with Yah, I focus on soul fragments a lot. Now, is that because I think that's all there is to sanctification/deliverance ministry? No, that's not the reason. Because there's so much more to spiritual warfare. But soul fragments is one of the easiest starting points for me to start from, to explain how this works. There's just so much evidence in the earthly first heaven where when I start talking about soul fragments, they can kind of be like, oh yeah, like that kind of, they can start connecting the dots. And so I can, see that and they can relate to it and they can just pick up on things a little bit, quicker. They can kind of just get that aha moment like, oh, I kind of get it now. So starting with soul fragments is a great diving board before jumping into the deeper ends of the pool, as they are a common place where the earthly and the spiritual heavens intersect. A lot of people, again, deal with them, whether it's through dreams, whether it's through parts of them coming up, manifesting through them, whether they know it or not. Enough said. You've probably heard me talk about soul fragments, heart parts, generational altars, those via soul ties, soul invaders such as witches, warlocks, or even those types of soul invaders that sometimes are referred to AHSs, alien human spirits, or sometimes called disembodied human spirits, that they can be connected to us. And many times, even our own heart parts, those soul fragments of us, are still back somewhere in time. They may be reliving a particular experience, or maybe they just haven't matured. They're stuck a lot of times, most times, in some realm, what is also known as a region of captivity. Some examples of this might be, the outer darkness, per Matthew 8:12, Matthew 22:13, and Matthew 25:30, or the underworld. Those are just a few, but there's thousands upon thousands of places of regions of captivity. And this happens with our heart parts as well as other types of soul fragments. Obviously, with other types of soul fragments, we can run into those going back tens, hundreds, even thousands of years. I've run one time into a soul fragment that had been roaming the earth for so long, he actually thought he was a demon at first. And it took me a while to figure out that he wasn't. And I was like, well, do you believe in Yeshua, Jesus? And he's like, well, yeah, I guess so. And I kind of explained it to him. And he's like, well, then I'm like, you're not a demon then. And he's like, I'm not? And I'm like, no, you're not. And so sometimes demons like to pretend to be people, and sometimes soul fragments like to pretend to be demons. Yes, welcome to spiritual warfare. So, let's talk about Rabbi Albert Einstein? Like what? I do believe time is different in the second heavens and above, based on Rabbi Albert Einstein, which is a joke, by the way. And the reason I believe this is because in the first heavenly heaven, he came up with the theory of relativity and even special relativity, which basically states that matter, in particular huge objects, cause fluctuations in space-time, which causes gravity. I may not have all that exactly perfect if you're a physicist, so please forgive me if so. That's just the general idea. Again, they're all related. Matter, space-time, gravity, time's affected by these things. And with that, I want to go to my first slide, so you don't have to necessarily look at me all night. There we go. Look at that slide. Little clock there, if you can't see it. The point being that there's no physicality in the second heavens and above, which again affects time. The various spiritual entities are just energy. I believe without mass or physicality, that time is different in those realms. So the spirit realm is much like a dream world, which is why the Bible says in Proverbs 23:7, "For as a person thinketh, so is he. In his heart, so is he." Now, moving on, I want to go to the gap theory. Some of you may know about this, and talk about in the beginning. These days, there appears to be much more non-scientific support for what is known as the gap theory, which I have no problem believing. Maybe not necessarily everything that's said about it, but much. This has been a theory that has been around for a long time. Because all science does is try to prove what is, to give it some type of formulas and, make it repeatable and all this type of stuff. And science is hardly infallible in itself because it's a human process. In any case, the gap theory states that basically there was a huge gap of time between Genesis 1, between verses 1 and 2. After all, the Bible has a few things to say throughout all the books about the fall of Satan, which seemed to occur before Adam and Eve's time in the garden. If you read Genesis 1 verse 3 there, as God says, "Let there be light," and there was light. Okay. He turned on the light switch. But notice what the Bible says regarding the fourth day of creation, starting there in Genesis 1, verse 14. It says, "Let the lights be for signs and appointed times, and for days and for years." And then it talks about the two great lights and the greater light, the lesser light, to give light on the earth and separating light from darkness. The fourth day. Interesting. Hold on a minute. Didn't we just read there? Doesn't it just say in verse 3 that light and darkness were created on the first day? But yet starting with verse 14 through 19, it talks about light being for the signs, appointed times, days, and years of the earth. So if we go to the next slide, in John 1, verse 6, the Bible talks about John being sent from God, and he was to bear witness of the light. John wasn't the light, but he was to bear witness of that light, that true light, which lightens every man that comes into the world. So in other words, light can also be illumination or revelation. And regarding the second day, let's carry this a little bit further. In verses 6 through 8, the Bible talks about the waters being separated. But we know that there's waters in the New Jerusalem. In Revelation 22, verse 1, I didn't put that verse up there. And even each of you, his disciples, those that are his disciples, have spiritual living waters flowing out of you. That's John 7, verse 38. Isn't that something? And in Genesis, verses 9 through 13, it talks about the plants and such, the third day. But if you look at the New Jerusalem in Revelation 22, verse 2, there's plants in the New Jerusalem. They're on either side of the river of living water that comes from under the throne. There's trees and stuff bearing their fruit every month for the healing of the nations. So in the heavens, we have light, and we have, again, waters, we have plants. But on the fourth day, the Bible specifically says the greater and the lesser lights were put in the sky for signs, appointed times, days, and years to give light on the earth. Could it be possible that the first earthly heaven, really the one that we live in, this physical world, wasn't created until day 4? Because really that's the first time that earth is mentioned. Think about it. The first 3 days actually don't require our earthly physical heaven. Just something to think about. Regardless, time as we know it didn't start until day 4. As it states, even in Revelation starting in 10 verse 5, actually in verse 6, that there should be time no longer. Kind of at the end of time. Some Bibles will say that there would be no more delay. Okay, I'm not going to bet the farm on that one, but it is kind of interesting wording. But, it may not be that strong of an argument, so I'm not going to hang my hat there. But it does say in Revelation 21, verse 1, that a new heaven and earth will be created, and all that currently exists will pass away. All right, what did I title this next section? Okay. Abstract is as abstract does. When we think about time, we think of it as an abstract concept, such as we do with feelings such as fear or faith or maybe locations such as heaven or hell, although we can relate to those a little bit more permeability, if you will. But still, we kind of think of them as abstract, cloud-like, dream-like locations. Or there could be other concepts in the Bible that aren't tangible, meaning we can't touch them, that the Bible talks about. And many times, these abstract concepts are actually spiritual beings, realms, or even substances in the spirit realm. This is just a different way of thinking, I know. And a lot of times, Yah is trying to tell us stuff, but it's having a hard time putting it in earthly terms. And so, go to my next slide here. So, I'm not going to go over all this word by word, but we see in Revelations 1:18, Revelations 20, verse 13, that death and Sheol, or hell, are being referred to as realms or locations. In Revelations 20, verse 14, right after that, after 20, verse 13, death and Sheol are being called out, they're being referenced as personal entities. They were thrown into the lake of the fire. We even see that in Revelation 6, verse 8, that, he who sat on it had the name death, and Sheol followed with him, and authority given to them. Because we know that, there are people that are in Sheol, but kind of like their house, like we are houses and we're tents and realms, if you will, they are as well. And we see in Hebrews 11:1, now faith is a substance. I haven't run across that one personally myself in the Spirit. I do know of people that I trust that say they have seen like rejection as like a slime. So again, a type of substance. We know in 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, God has not given us the spirit of fear. Again, we think of fear as being not tangible, as abstract. But in the spirit realm, we know about various unclean spirits, fear, rejection, hatred, stuff like that. So, just kind of making a point there that, again, abstract concepts can actually be beings, realms, or substances. I think I've talked a few times about when last time I was in California, where I ran into the collective unconsciousness, these unclean spirits that call themselves, kind of thought that they were like the universe, which I've run into unclean spirits that, call themselves the universe also as well. Anyways, I'm going to move on to the next point, being just a little description of an encounter I had with the timekeeper. Why do I bring up these verses? To tell you that the Bible has much to tell us about the spirit realm, but often we gloss over these verses, or at least I did, until they were pointed out to me, until I kind of read them differently. At which time I was like, ooh, like, oh, that's what that means. So the Bible hints at so much, and it's really only telling us what we need to know, because Yah has us on a need-to-know basis. I've heard it said, and I forgot who said this, that every generation has their theological battles to deal with. At some point in time, more revelation comes out. At some point in time, with deliverance ministry, there was Derek Prince, and I'm very thankful for him. But there's a lot of things that we're dealing with now that Derek Prince did not have to deal with. I'm not saying that what he said was not true. It was just very initial. And so right now, even Madeline sent me an email the other day that it may have been today, that things are changing very fast, and they are. Now, Yah doesn't reveal his mysteries until such a time that they are needed. Which makes you wonder, why are there teachings such as this one coming out now, around the time of all these, demonic UFOs and government UAPs and such. I think some of those are demonic spirits, and I do believe some of the other ones are, government stuff. Why is Yah making us aware of these things now? I will let you stew on that in your own time. Maybe you can come up with your own live stream. So a few years ago, I was in this session with this lady, and in that session, in the spirit, I see like this frog-looking creature, and it's standing up on two legs, and it has this white lab coat on, and it has 3 eyes, and it has its hand like on a handle, with all kinds of cogs, all around it, I'm seeing in each corner of the picture. And I'm like talking to this thing, through the woman, and he goes, "I'm the timekeeper." And I'm like, "Oh, so you're kind of like Kronos." And I believe he said, "Yes, that's who I am. That's some type of Greek deity for time." I believe it was Greek. I don't know. Maybe he was related to the key maker in the Matrix movies. I don't know. Just a thought. But in any case, time in the spirit realm is much different than what we think it is. I'm just going to go over this verse right quickly. In the book of Joshua, we know that Yah was able to stop time so that the Jews could overtake their enemies. So it's not always this constant thing that we think it is. Okay, moving on to slide number 5 there. Question: is time affected by our actions? Madeline says, for those that aren't on Facebook, because he's about... Is it still showing there? Because he's about to allow reevaluation of end time things that will cause men to die from fright. Yes, I do believe that is coming. I think it talks, in the book of Daniel that, knowledge is going to increase, that men are to be going to and fro. Not really paraphrasing that verse very well. But yes, I do think there's going to be, things are advancing, and it's going to get a little bit nutso for those that aren't really grounded, even for some of those Bible believers that aren't really grounded in their faith. If they don't know their Bible so well, if they don't, it's going to be tough. Which is why Walk with Yah is here, trying to give you lessons like this. And so, is time affected by our actions? In Genesis 3, verse 21, the Bible talks about how Adam and Eve, once they had sinned, they were actually cast out of the garden. Now, what if they would have remained in the garden? They would have been able to continue eating from the tree of life, in which case they would have lived forever. But their decision to not believe Yah, not believe God, caused them to be cast out of the garden, and therefore to start dying. Spiritually, their bodies then slowly, as we know, the lifespan started slowly over hundreds and thousands of years, started decaying. Even in Genesis 6, verse 3, Yah said, "My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His day shall be 120 years. Didn't necessarily, some people believe that didn't necessarily mean that a man would be 120 years, that would be their lifespan, but that 120 years after that statement came the flood. One way of looking at that. Kind of makes sense. In 2 Peter 3, verse 11, it talks about how we can hasten the time. Mean that we should desire earnestly, hasten the time, hasten the coming of the day of Elohim, meaning to speed in a way as to study, or to make haste unto. But I believe just as we can cause delay by our actions, sometimes we don't get our blessings because we're waiting on somebody else, or somebody else is not getting their blessings because they're waiting on us, that we can, in some kind of ways, affect time in that way also as well. And so we can actually speed time up, though. Our blessings, things like that come to us, the more obedient we are. As in teaching you spiritual warfare. If you don't study and understand spiritual warfare, those curses may remain on your life and you may not get your blessings, which isn't going to really, it will slow down your blessings. In Genesis 15, verse 13, Yahweh talks about Abraham, telling him, even before any of this stuff happens of what's going to happen to Abraham in his walk, he's talking about the sojourners that are in a land that is not theirs, where he's sending Abram. And he's like, look, my people, Abram, your people, are going to be afflicted for 400 years. And he's like, but they're going to come back here in the fourth generation because the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So there are, much like in Revelation, it talks about the prayer bowls being filled. Sometimes the prayers of incense, the bowls of incense, which were the prayers, and so those bowls have to fill up in order before God responds. And in this case, the iniquity also had to fill, which took 400 years, or 4 generations, however you want to look at that, for the iniquity of the Amorites to fill up. So yes, our actions can affect curses or blessings. Much like in Deuteronomy 26, 27, 28. Madeline says, I like that God will shorten the days or no one else will survive. Yeah, I do believe that he set the number of hours to 24 hours. Otherwise, any longer than that, and men would not be able to survive. And he did that out of the grace of his heart. And so I was ministering to someone here recently, and I was basically trying to redeem their time, because I was like, hey, you unclean spirits, you have stolen from them. You have taken their time. And this unclean spirit came up, and just as soon as I said that, he manifested. And if looks could cause me harm, he was not happy with me at all. And he did not like the fact that I called him out on that one. And anyways, didn't let it bother me. I'm just like, okay, whatever, that's your problem, not mine. But yeah, he did not like the fact that that was identified. So in Revelations 5, verse 8, that's what I was talking about. Again, kind of like the Amorites, that the prayers of the saints, the bowls have to fill up. And so if we're not praying for your loved ones, for others, even that you don't love, those prayer bowls of incense, they're not filling up. And so just an incentive to pray. So maybe it's more correct to say that we can't change time itself, although, of course, Yah can, but rather the times when Yah chooses to move on our behalf. I believe that there are some things that are going to happen regardless of what happens on earth. But there's also other instances where Yah has some fudge room, where he has the flexibility to change time in whatever way he so chooses. Okay. Yes, as Madeline says, pray without ceasing. As I've heard many people say, like, that have died and come back in other instances, like, if you knew how powerful your prayers were, like, you would, yes, pray without ceasing. I know a lot of times in sessions, things don't happen unless you pray, unless things happen. I got some shorts, Walk with Yah shorts and reels and stuff like that coming out that I was recording today. And basically, the point is that Yah, a lot of times, just doesn't move because we're suffering. Because that doesn't really move him. Otherwise, he'd be in hospitals and you'd be seeing, churches and hospitals. What moves him is faith. Not just faith as in believing, but faith in doing, because faith is an action word. And if you have an opportunity to do something and you don't, even as James says, I'll show you my faith by what I do. And so he's moved by faith in what he has written and living his word, believing in his son, etc. Okay, so I'm going to start changing the course here of where we're going in this teaching. In John chapter 7, verse 6, Yeshua says, he's telling his brothers here, he's about to go to the feast. And his brothers, blood brothers, at the time really did not believe in him. They were like, why don't you go up to the feast and show yourself off and, and kind of shut these people down, because they wanted to see the proofs themselves. And so he responded to them saying, my time has not yet come, but your time is always ready. You always want to do things in your time. And he says, my time has not yet been fulfilled. He says there in verse 8, I am not yet going up to this festival. My time has not yet been fulfilled. So basically, Yeshua is saying that we as people aren't always in sync with his time, as we often live for the present with our own agenda, or by making plans for what we think is the best for the future. A lot of people, when they come for deliverance, sanctification, they want their immediate pain gone, resolved. That's the primary issue. I get it. We as people were like, don't like pain. But sometimes Yeshua's like, okay, I know you want to go from A to Z in a direct line, but we're going to go this way because I got other work that needs to be done. And there's been times where I have prayed over people for healing and then listened, and he was like, no, they have to forgive first. And then when they did, then the healing came. So Yeshua, Jesus, said quite often for people not to share about the miracles he performed because he wanted to do things in his Father's time, in his Father's way. As he said, I only do what the Father shows me to do. I only say what he tells me to say. Next topic. The battle for the appointed times. Did you know, by the way, that there are satanic calendars? At which time many of those that are survivors of satanic ritual abuse, SRA, mind control programming, or various types of witchcraft, they will often feel off or cloudy or get attacked on their particular holidays. And I'm not necessarily going to go there so much, but the enemy has their own calendar. And I'm just saying that Ha-Satan, the adversary, Satan, the adversary, Ha-Satan, tries to pervert Yah's time, which we find in Daniel chapter 7, starting in verse 21, where it's talking about the fourth beast being the last beast that came up, on the earth. It devours all the other beasts. It devours all the earth, tramples and crushes it. That's verse 23. And then it talks about, in verse 25, and it speaks words against the Most High, and it wears out the set-apart ones of the Most High. This is what Madeline was talking about. Iniquity abounds today, even amongst those that believe in Jesus. Maybe not disciples, but believe. It wears out the set-apart ones of the Most High, and it attends to change the appointed times, also known as the Moedim, or festivals. That's what appointed times are. These are meetings with Yah, with God, when He desires to meet with His people. And so this fourth beast wants to change the appointed times, as well as the Torah, also known as the law. And the people are given into this fourth beast's hand for time and times and half a time. So keep in mind that the feasts, the biblical feasts, are summarized in Leviticus 23, but they're elsewhere, but just good summary there. That these are, again, biblical feasts, not Jewish feasts. They're biblical feasts. They're, depends on how you define Jew. These, again, are times when Yah wants to meet with His people. So, of course, Satan will and has tried to successfully, he's done this successfully, in large part, to get people not to celebrate Yah's feasts. And it's never too late to start honoring the Sabbath, if at all possible. I understand people have to work, and we're still not of this world, but in this world. But again, if you can, I'm sure He would like it. It's not too late to start celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles and other feasts. Passover is probably the only biblical set-apart time that people honor generically. But there are many other set-apart times that Yah, God, has stated Himself, I want these ones, they will be forever. And the enemy has twisted those. Because Yah, God, likes to meet with His people. As it states in some verses here I thought were kind of neat. in Exodus 24, verse 8. It talks about Moses going out with all the leaders, the 70 elders, and they saw Elohim. They actually ate and drank with him. I'm like, wow. Like, that blows my mind. And you can check your Bible, but that's what my Bible says. Exodus 24, verse 11. That, I'm just blown away by that. And even in Exodus 29, verse 45, the Bible says that that God shall dwell in the midst of the children of Israel and shall be their Elohim. And we see in 1 Kings, verse 8, that he filled the temple again that was in the midst of the temple was in the midst of their people, because if it was just in the midst of the people. I'll just leave it at that for right now. Joe, does that mean we shouldn't? Can you please expand on that sentence again? I just want to make sure that I get the correct understanding of that sentence. And then here's one that's kind of really weird. Deuteronomy 23, verse 12. And basically, I'll sum it up for you. He's like, look, when you go use the bathroom outside the camp, clean up your mess, because I'm going to be walking amongst you, and your camp must be holy, otherwise set apart, so that God doesn't see anything indecent among you and turn away from you. I'm like, okay. Okay, so Joe's asking, do we share the signs and wonders that we've experienced, or was that only relevant to Jesus' timing? I believe that we should share the signs and wonders that we've experienced. However, you got to do that with the right heart. I'll explain that in a second. Because we know in Revelation it says that we overcome the enemy by the blood of Yeshua and the power of our testimony. So, and we know that the reason that's done, one reason, is that when we give that testimony, it builds other people's faith when they hear it, and therefore it may allow for that miracle or happening possibly to happen again, either in that moment, or because I'm sure I've heard stories, I'm like, oh my gosh, this person had this faith to do that. Can I have that faith? And, let me try that out. And so, but I say in the right heart, because there's some people that can go after the fireworks, if you will. They think they're more about the gifts than they are the giver of the gifts. For a while, I was going out and doing the power evangelism a long time ago, and ran into this young kid, and he was in his young 20s, and this was around the Curry Blake time, divine healing technician, the DHT stuff, I think, is what they call it. And he was like, hey, I just want to be on the DRT team, the dead raising team in Atlanta. He was young. I mean, I'm sure I've done stuff like that too. And so, again, it's just having the right heart about it. If it's just about glorifying yourself and to say, hey, I've done it, that may be a good reason not to share. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? And so, and the Bible also says, don't give your pearls to pigs. In one of my Q&As I did on here in the past week, someone from YouTube started raising a question, and he was kind of being a little sarcastic, like, prove it, which was, anyways. And I was like, okay, let me try to answer it with the right way, in the right heart. And so I did, and he came back with another statement. And I was like, okay, let me try to expand on what I'm saying to say, hey, like, if you don't have the right heart, like, you need the things that I was talking about, you need to have faith for, which requires the right heart. And people that really don't care to see God, they're going to be sarcastic, and you need to come at him with the right heart. Anyways, I tried to give an appropriate answer, and then he responded again, but he went back to the first question. So he was just going in circles. And at that point in time, I'm like, I'm done. I'm not having this conversation anymore. And so, as Madeline says, in my humble opinion, when you share the good things of God, it creates an atmosphere for miracles. He said, when we talk about him, he instructs his angels to write our names down in the book of remembrance. Yeah, sure. Yes. Totally. All right. I want to get into this thing I call the patterns of time intro, which is kind of coming towards the end of this teaching. I'll explain that in a moment. But I want to get to really the crux of this message. What I actually want to talk about, now that I'm running out of time, time's a funny thing. In this earthly heaven, time repeats itself every day, but yet it moves forward at the same time. One of those philosophical questions where you just run in circles and chase your tail. We just finished glossing over the biblical feasts, which are Yah's appointed times, when he wants to meet with us, which are to be done every year. Yes, there's prophetic messages in them. Yes, some of them have been fulfilled. Others are yet to be fulfilled. We are practicing for when things happen. Anyways, we are practicing. We'll be doing these feasts forever, by the way. And I would be remiss as a sanctification minister if I didn't mention generational curses, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. And this is stated explicitly in Exodus 20, verse 5, and Exodus 34, verse 7. And this is caused by iniquity, not sin, iniquity, which is when Yah's word gets twisted so bad within a person, it actually changes their essence. Iniquity actually affects our spiritual DNA, in addition to our physical characteristics and moral compass, which gets passed down to the next generations. Our physical characteristics being, some of our DNA. Grandfather was an alcoholic and dad's an alcoholic. Chances are you could be an alcoholic as well. And I do have to admit, though, it is very hard to find explicit examples of generational curses in the Bible itself. Although experientially, because the Bible says they do exist, we know that they do. And there have been many unclean spirits I've dealt with that have attested to generational curses. I run into them all the time. In any case, as we are talking about this, many people misinterpret this verse by the way. And I'm not going to get into this so much, because actually this is something that I and Joe were kind of talking about. Galatians 3:13. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. And again, I'm not going to go into this too much. I had a Walk with Yah video Q&A number 18 called What is the Curse of the Law? If you want to know more on that topic, but that isn't really what I'm talking about today, believe it or not. What I'm trying to get to is recurring patterns, or fractals, as the Bible says. Yeah. So curses still exist. We still die. Just because Yeshua came guess what? There's still sin in the world. We still have the effects of sin. There are women that still have pain during childbirth. We still have to toil the land, etc., etc. And it says, even in Revelations, that the curses will not stop until, like, Revelations 22, thereabouts. Anyways. You're welcome, Joe. Glad I could help. And so, in Ecclesiastes, what I'm trying to get to here in this Patterns of Time intro at the end, in Ecclesiastes 1 verse 9 says, what has been is what shall be. What has been done is what shall be done. And there's no new matter under the sun. Is there a matter of which it is said, see, this is new. It was here already long ago. And Ecclesiastes 3:15, whatever is has already been, and what shall has been before. But Elohim seeks out what has been pursued. And let's see. Sorry, I'm going to write my notes right quick. Okay, I won't let it go. I was going to say something, but I can't remember what it is. Okay, so when we read or hear what the Bible preaches, what the Bible has to say, what we are trying to learn are the lessons, the principles of life that either lead to death or life. And these are basically patterns that can be repeated. And basically, you won't get his complete peace and prosperity, which isn't always money, until his ways are a part of you, exemplified in the Torah, because the Torah shows us Yah's heart and mind. But it's more than the Torah. It's Yeshua, his living word. And I want to end on this short note, although I still got a little bit here to say. And I'm going to be honest here. For some of you, you may think walk with Yah is at the deep end of the pool. But to be honest, I'm only in the middle of the pool, or maybe even still the shallow end. Because walk with Yah tries to open up people to the spiritual realm, using a strong biblical foundation to where they can go even deeper. Yet walk with Yah tries to give a secure biblical foundation to show you that these spiritual encounters are indeed valid and true. I don't have the bandwidth to go into, at this moment, of how the stories in the Torah can actually, where it actually uses various people and stories to tell bigger truths that play out in time. I'm trying to give an example of that. I'm going to leave that alone for right now until I can word it better. The Bible says to get wisdom, biblical wisdom, that should be the principal thing. But we are in a time when people are largely biblically illiterate. Again, I'm not condemning people. I'm just calling them stupid. I'm just saying they're ignorant. They don't know. Some of that may be because of complacency, laziness, upbringing, environment, who knows? I'm just stating that's what it is. Again, I don't claim to know everything the Bible myself. But the Bible does say the beginning of wisdom is get wisdom. With all you're getting, get understanding. Again, biblical understanding. That he who is trustworthy in least will be given more. And if you have some stuff, if you don't, if you're not trustworthy in what he's given you, well, then he might take away what he's given you. I think that's also Matthew 18, where he's talking about the talents also as well, now that I think about it. Anyways, so he wants us to invest in him. The reason I learn things is because I invest in people. I invest in, spiritual warfare, and so I get to learn stuff, which I enjoy. Why do I say this? I watched a recent podcast with Dan Duvall, and I was very aware of many of the things that he talked about. Things I haven't talked about on these live streams, these Walk with Y'all live streams, or in social media, just because, again, I don't have the bandwidth. But in this video, he strung together different concepts, many of which I've experienced, but not all that he mentions. And what he says makes sense to me, although to many of you it may sound utterly crazy. And if it does sound crazy to you, I suggest that you read 1 Corinthians chapter 2. Or even listen to maybe Kevin Zadai, perhaps, who talks about the Nephilims and the Greys and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of stuff that we do not know about. The Bible hints at a lot of things. Anyways, Dan Duvall kind of starts putting the pieces and stuff together. And I'm like, that makes sense. Because we run into a lot of these verses in Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Revelation, Genesis. And you're like, what do you kind of do with that? Like that verse, like that came out of nowhere. But in these end days, God, by his Spirit, is giving revelation. And again, you have to ask, why now? And I do hope to do the scientific method at some point in time to see if I get the same results that Dan is getting, because he's working with the human spirit and all this type of stuff. I'm not going to get off track. I will let you watch the videos. But I do hope to do the scientific method to kind of do what he is modeling and playing with, to see if I too can get the same results when working with people's human spirit when it's appropriate. So if you want to learn more about what I'm calling patterns of time, I strongly suggest that you watch either that first video or the second one. If you're watching it later, I don't think you'll be able to click on those links, which is why I put the titles there. And that second link, again, is a series. That is just part 1. They're up to part 4 right now. And there is a much bigger picture that's going on that most people are aware of, a bigger spiritual battle. And so it makes sense to me, and it makes me want to try more things and test more things to help bring healing to people, hopefully quicker, if they don't let their traditions of men and mind and soul and all that stuff get in the way. There's some places I can't go with people. And so, again, those videos that I put up there, they are not for the faint of heart. And they're going to test your biblical knowledge, what you think you know. And so there's a lot of people that think that what I do is New Age. And much like Yeshua says, well, if you don't believe the words I say, well, then at least believe the works that I do. And sometimes they don't have the faith to go there. Okay. I'm praying in time. That changes. I'm not condemning them. I myself was sheltered. So I get it. And so, I'm not saying believe everything and anything, because the Bible says we're supposed to test the spirits. And so I'm not saying, go to the shamans. I'm not saying, because the enemy knows how to twist the Bible. Madeline says, God wants his remnant aware of all unfolding, to be grounded in him, and to be his light in others on the other side of the catastrophic events. Chosen for such a time as this, find your end time assignment and be about his business. So basically, we're supposed to seek the kingdom first, and you're supposed to, seek all these things and everything else will be given unto you. Your treasures where your heart is. We're supposed to be, you hear me talk about 1 Corinthians 10 all the time, that even though we're carnal, our weapons are spiritual. They're not carnal. So we have to fight spiritually. Again, but I warn you, if you watch those videos, if you're stuck in the traditions of men, you're going to have a hard time with it, and it might throw you off. If you don't understand how spiritual warfare works, or if you don't know the Bible very well, basically spirit and truth, you might get overwhelmed or think it's just, again, crazy talk. I will close by saying that I feel that God, may have some changes coming for Walk with Yah, and I'm not exactly sure what that means regarding the current format of social media videos and how that may change. Time will tell, I suppose, but I at least plan on having, at this point in time, some video content out there to teach others. Because again, I like to teach people how to fish, if you will, because a lot of people don't understand spiritual warfare. So at this point in time, I guess, maybe I did give you some heads up that I was coming to an end. I don't know if anyone has any questions, any comments. Slightly over an hour. We got a lot done in an hour, and so I'd like to keep my my audience riveted, and like to keep these action packed, and so. But yeah, there's a lot going on. I got a lot of learning that has been going on here lately with myself. Again, don't always have the bandwidth time to share. And so I hope that this helps you. I hope that this helps you understand that, again, there's a much bigger picture. Everything that he has to show us isn't all in this earth or about this time that we're on the earth. There's a much bigger picture, bigger battle, and things are starting to come out, and we live in interesting times. And so, but I bless you. I thank you for being here. I pray that this blesses you. I ask that you would share this information with other people to help them understand, what they're battling against, to teach them regarding spiritual warfare, to lead them to the Walk with God videos. And so, you can click on the like button, or put your comments in again later. That will help. Share this ministry with people so they can understand what it is that they're fighting. And I ask you to just pray for me that I may do what he has called me to do, because again, I'm feeling some changes coming up, but I'm excited. But this is Noe with Walk with Yah. Shalom, and maybe your miracle could be next.